Most people believe that love ends with a bang, a dramatic betrayal, a slammed door, or a slow, agonizing drift born of fundamental incompatibility. We brace ourselves for the grand catastrophes, the tectonic shifts that tear two lives apart. But reality is far more mundane, and infinitely more brutal. Love rarely dies in a fire. It usually suffocates in the small, airless room of our own daily impatience. We lose the people who understand us best not because we stopped caring, but because we forgot how to breathe through the minor friction of living. We treat our safe spaces like trash cans for the accumulated stress of the world, dumping our exhaustion onto the one person who actually bothers to unpack our silence. Think about the last time you truly imploded. It probably wasn't over a life-altering crisis. It was likely a Tuesday evening, the apartment was warm, traffic had been unbearable, and your partner asked a completely harmless question about dinner, or left a mug on the counter, or breathed a fraction too loudly. And you snapped. Not a gentle correction, but a full-throttle, venomous release of pressure that had nothing to do with them and everything to do with your inability to handle your own internal weather. You weaponized their vulnerability against them. You took the one soul on this planet who knew the exact shape of your insecurities and deliberately aimed for the weak spots, just because you needed someone to share the weight of your bad mood. We live under the dangerous illusion that a deep connection is indestructible, as if mutual understanding is some kind of titanium armor that can withstand endless abuse. We operate on the arrogant assumption that because they know we love them, they will automatically decode our cruelty as temporary stress rather than intentional malice. That is the great lie we tell ourselves to justify our lack of emotional hygiene. We save our best manners for strangers, employers, and casual acquaintances, people who care very little about our actual well-being, while reserving our harshest tones, our sharpest rejections, and our most selfish impulses for the people whose entire world revolves around our safety. We gamble with the most precious currency we have, convinced the bank will never run dry. Then comes the silence. That particular, heavy kind of quiet that settles over a room after the shouting stops or the cutting text is sent. At first, there is a stubborn spike of adrenaline, a self-righteous ego stroke that tells you that you were right to be angry, that your frustration was justified, that they deserved the lash of your tongue. You walk around with your chest puffed out, treasuring your grievance like a rare trophy. But hours pass, the apartment grows cold, and the adrenaline drains away, leaving behind a hollow, nauseating realization. The issue was never the mug on the counter, the delayed text, or the tone of voice. The issue was your own fragile, overstretched tolerance for life, and you just took a sledgehammer to the only person who made the noise bearable. This is where the anatomy of regret truly begins. It doesn't arrive as a sudden lightning strike, it creeps in through the mundane details. You see something funny on your phone and automatically turn to share it, only to remember that the chair next to you is empty. You reach out in the dark out of habit, finding only cold sheets. Your brain replays that specific moment of friction, dissecting every micro-expression, every flinch on their face when your words hit home. You realize with a sickening jolt of clarity that while you were busy defending your petty ego, you were actively dismantling the fortress of trust they spent years building for you. You traded a moment of toxic release for a lifetime of quiet absence, and the worst part is, you did it to yourself. We spend an absurd amount of time mourning lost opportunities, failed careers, and unfulfilled ambitions, as if those are the metrics that define a ruined life. But true devastation is much quieter. It lives in the memory of a look, that split second when their eyes widen not with anger, but with a quiet, defeated realization that you are no longer a safe place for them. That is the image that haunts you at 3 a.m. when the house is still. Not the argument itself, but the precise moment you broke the glass and realized you could never glue it back together in quite the same way. You traded a soft landing for a sharp edge, and now you have to live with the jagged pieces. The tragedy of human interaction is that we are chronically allergic to our own vulnerability. When stress mounts and the pressure cooker of modern existence threatens to blow our lids off, our primitive brain takes the wheel. We lash out because vulnerability feels like a risk, whereas anger feels like armor. We push away the very hands that are trying to steady us, convincing ourselves in our warped moments of self-preservation that we are better off fighting alone. We mistake isolation for strength and patience for weakness, walking around like loaded weapons waiting for an excuse to misfire at the people who love us unconditionally. And when the smoke clears, the math of regret is simple and unforgiving. No grand apology can ever fully erase the echo of unnecessary cruelty. You can say you didn't mean it, you can explain away the context, you can point to the heavy workload, the bad traffic, the endless list of modern anxieties, but the residue remains. They might forgive you, because love is remarkably stubborn that way, but memory has a longer shelf life than forgiveness. The next time you are stressed, they will remember. The next time life presses hard against them, they will hesitate before leaning on you. You didn't just win an argument, you successfully taught the person who understood you best that it is dangerous to get too close. So we sit in the aftermath, scrolling through old messages, replaying the tape of our own idiocy, wishing with every fiber of our being that we could rewind the clock by 30 seconds. Just 30 seconds. Just enough time to close our mouths, take a ragged breath, unclench our fists, and swallow the cheap satisfaction of being right. If we could just compress that sudden surge of rage into a single breath of silence, entire relationships could be saved from the graveyard of ego. But time only moves forward, dragging us away from the moments we ruined with our own impatience. Ultimately, life is not measured by the battles we won against the world, but by the quiet casualties we inflicted on the people who stayed. Every time you let your stress run rampant over someone who loves you, you are writing the script for your own future loneliness. The ghosts that haunt us the most aren't the strangers who wronged us, but the versions of ourselves that couldn't keep cool when it mattered most. We are all walking crime scenes of our own short tempers, haunted by the quiet echo of words we can never take back, wishing against all laws of physics that we had just had the basic human decency to stay silent when the storm inside us started to rise. You spent a lifetime building a fortress of safety, and burned it down in 30 seconds of noise.